Billionaire Bill for $2 million was a record-breaking sale. He had mixed the wines himself in his California kitchen from cheap bottles, and when they didn't, they'd be too embarrassed to admit that they had been duped, or so he hoped. It was the perfect scam, even appearing on the news as a credible wine fraud expert, warning people about fake wines flooding the market, without mentioning, of course, that he was the one making them. Still, he knew it was beyond risky. One mistake and these billionaires could have ruined his life. But Rudy was confident. He spent years within these elite circles, building a reputation as a wine prodigy, and now he was ready to abuse it. Then Rudy showed up, young, charming, and somehow always bragging about having tasted the rarest bottles in the room.
Are you independently wealthy? No, I'm broke. That's Millionaires. No, I'm drunk. I scam people. Freaking wise.
But this got him into a private wine tasting group called the Angry Men's Club, a sort of fake club for billionaires with wine cellars. Once a month, they all got together, and one guy would bring an astoundingly rare bottle. Hence, he'd be the angry man. Rudy, when hosting, always impressed with a rare vintage, pinpoint specific grapes, regions, dissect exactly what went into it in wine, and to wine enthusiasts, the only way to acquire the skill was to have tasted thousands of bottles. He became stuff of legend. Soon enough, everyone knew his name. They wanted him at their parties, and he was inviting them to his own, but no one really knew him. Rudy himself would tell people that he was on a $1 million a month allowance to buy wine, and people would see him spending this at auctions. It was no secret. Even his name wasn't totally legit. Rudy Kurniawan, who was so close to a famous Indonesian badminton player, was strange. They knew him in the early days, or were at least aware of him, before he was hosting these private wine tastings or rubbing shoulders with celebrities, before his spending exploded at auction to selling millions of dollars in wine. And to answer that question, we have to go way back to Jakarta, Indonesia.
When we drink wine, we don't look at the price value. We look at what we get from the wine.
Real name wasn't Rudy. It was Zhen Wang. But in Indonesia, being ethnically Chinese meant you were treated like a second-class citizen. He was on one of these visits in 1999 that Rudy discovered his passion for wine. To treat his dad, he decided to buy him the most expensive wine on the menu, a 1996 Opus wine. It was acidic and intense, layered with delicate flavors. He was obsessed, different flavor profiles of each wine. But then tragedy struck. In 2000, Rudy's father died, and to cope, Drew focused all his attention on this new passion. Rudy, being only in his early 20s at the time, was often the youngest person there. People noticed that he was unbelievably accurate in his wine palate. But having a good palate and attending local wine tastings wasn't enough to really cement him within this community. Wasn't getting invited. He really started attending and bidding in wine auctions. At first, it was a few $1,000s here and there, but by 2003, his spending exploded. Millions of dollars a year on wine. There's some secrets about his family that couldn't have been traced back to his assumed last name. In the late 90s, he saved or reported $600 million. It was one of the biggest financial scandals in the country's history. He fled to Australia, lived in luxury until he died of a heart attack in 2003 while failing extradition. Another uncle, Eddie Tansel, pulled the big dirty Jew, embezzled $420 million from a state-run bank. In 1996, he escaped through bribes. Today, he is thought to be living in Macau, but a beer company. That's really curious. I mean, this guy would have the connections for labels, bottles, quirks that could be useful for someone trying to manufacture fake knockoffs of rare wines. But this is the kind of family that Rudy came from. Bank scammers that knew how to embezzle and disappear when they needed you. But because he was spending so much on wine, he started to get invited to more and more high-end wine tastings with even more affluent guests. Got more access, started to be invited to private dinners, better wine, bigger names, even started hosting his own parties. Basically, every collector knew that somewhere in the wine cellar there was a huge forged bottle set they don't know about, just waiting to be discovered. Many of the people who enjoyed the wines originally are long gone. Likewise, the memory of how those wines tasted has been completely lost to time. Every part of the wine had to be examined. It takes a lot of time, energy, money. Those collectors, they were hoping that the auction houses had done their due diligence for them. The truth was, while they may have lost thousands of dollars, the majority of those involved in this hobby are wealthy, they're drinking it right, and so they don't care about the money. He knew that a few fakes were bound to slip into his collection. It was part of the game, and honestly, he was fine with that. And he knew this was a sloppy job because they could have blended different wines together to make it pass as if it was a real thing. but whoever was making these must have lacked the power to do so. Suddenly, collectors who once ignored the wine started noticing that it was nowhere to be found. Then a few weeks later, Rudy would flip the exact same bottles back to the auction house he bought them from, only this time for a much higher price. It was becoming harder and harder for Rudy to actually find the real authentic rare bottles of wine. At this time, Rudy also had adopted the image that he was an expert on fake wines. Naturally, buying so much he had many fakes in his own collection. But as he was looking at them, he realized he could do better. But Rudy knew. No one was gonna know. These are the low-hanging fruit, if you will, of the wine faking world.
Really, it's hard. I've been Bar's core friend.
Rudy got away with this, and I'm sure that gave him a level of confidence. Having fake bottles labels courage and seals of manufacture to fake millions of dollars in the rarest wines at an industrial scale. Agramero and Conde is wine store in New York. Where do you order this in America? Auction houses could take anywhere from 5 to 20% in fees, sometimes on both sides of the deal. But there was one problem. John wanted to compete with the giants like Sotheby's or Christie's. He needed a show-stopping auction. Finally, Rudy bet, but not to do a public auction, just a few small private sales. This is where Rudy would meet Bill Koch, a billionaire heir to an oil empire. 33,000 bottles in the same. Actually, at many of the auctions that Rudy was attending, one of Bill's representatives would be right next to him trying to outbid him. But now, Rudy was selling off a few of the bottles. He needed Rudy to do something bigger, a public auction with thousands of bottles. And on April 25th, it finally came to light. John treated them like a giant party. There were rowdy, loud, boozy guys screaming across the room, driving vintages mid-bid. At one point, John had to pipe up and say, "Hey, shut the heck up." He was an amazing seller. They made $24.7 million in a single night.
$100 million, the first wine house to do so. John, keep on joining me so you can't whine about that revenue rate. Get it?
For a while, the partnership looked unstoppable. Between Rudy's collection and John's marketing, they moved $35 million worth of wine, over 14,000 bottles, just in 2006 through a series of auctions. And this was true for thousands of bottles, but for thousands more, they'd been faked. Rudy was actually taking all of these bottles he was sourcing and soaking them in his kitchen sink to remove the old labels. Finally, we corked them using a period-accurate cork and wax seal, using a specially made stamp to match the original. It was clear that Rudy was putting a lot of time and effort into this. Absolutely nobody noticed that many of these bottles in 2006 auctions were actually just made in his kitchen. And since the relationship was going so well, John started offering Rudy loans in advance on future wine auctions, millions in cash on deal for bottles to be sold at a later date. Rudy had got caught up in playing the part, trying to keep up with the actual billionaires he was surrounded by. He was buying luxury cars, including a Bugatti. He got himself a very nice mansion, was spending tens of thousands on these dinners he was hosting, suits, watches, the whole shebang. The myth of Rudy was over. Rudy was taken to a detention center in New York City, deemed a flight risk, and denied bail. Collectors like Bill had spent millions on Rudy's wines. After serving 7 years, Rudy was released in November 2020. ICE deported him back to Indonesia in April 2021. He's since been hosting exclusive tastings in Singapore and Hong Kong, creating his fake versions of legendary wines for people to taste at a fraction of the price.